That's it. Now, stop the bleeding. Focus. Good. You succeeded. Mastering your breathing. It will open many doors for you. Now, it won't solve everything, but it will help. You will continue to grow stronger. Thank you.
I was the vibrate. Y'all know what it is. You know, just a little disclaimer before. Disclaimer. Starting with a D already. You know, just giving this little awareness before starting this video. You know, to do research on, you know, to those who may be watching this for the first time and haven't done any research. You know, you got to do your own research, especially with ancient texts first. Now, I'll be always honest and truthful. Yes, some of us can pick up on ancient truths within, let's just say, movies, you know, shows, animes, you know, comics, you know, regular books, or fictional, quote unquote, books or stories. Like, some of us can pick up on the deeper truths within these things. But ultimately, you know, when, you know, if you're expressing this to somebody from the perspective of like trying to teach, or, you know what I'm saying, like, this is more so a message than teaching, you know, but just want to bring to the awareness that, like, what I'm about to speak on, you know, you have to already then had certain experiences and you know, done certain levels of research, you know. So we'll just start there, even though it still may even make sense to you in certain ways, you know, and that will point to you being intuitively aware enough to still pick up on the certain truths, although you haven't researched a lot or had a lot of experiences with it. But noticing the, you know, the alphabet D, and so, you know, it showed up to me, and I'm usually, like, be honest with you, like, especially something like Sandman, that kind of carries like a kind of darker tone to it, in the sense of, you know, especially the comic books, because I feel like the comic books is just as raw as the show was. And I'm not suggesting that anybody go and watch it or read the comics unless, you know that you're into that type of stuff, you know, because it has a pretty more, you know, darker side to it, you know. And maybe I should use another word, because we do be aware of, like, oh, it's dark, you know, but let's just say it's it has like, you know, what's the better word for it? Like, you got gore and blood and, you know, people transitioning and unaliving themselves. And it also has certain types of truths in it that if you know, if you're going through certain tough moments mentally, or if you've had trauma dealing with spiritual awakening, you know, whether it be a quote unquote bad trip, you know, with psychedelics, or just a, you know, a tough spiritual moment with seeing a certain type of entity when you were younger or as of recently, you know, all of that, you know, if you've been through any of those types of things, this show wouldn't be the best show for you to be watching. But I'm only referencing this little picture from, you know, a description of an episode. And just because I was noticing all the D's. And so you got the character Morpheus, which he's like basically called the dream or the dreaming. and he has some siblings. As a matter of fact, just to go from there, he's summoned to attend a family gathering of the endless. Of the endless. The endless are, his family. That's their quote-unquote name. And his siblings is destiny, death, desire, despair, and delirium. And his name is Dream. And it's like destiny, death, desire, despair, delirium. And, the D, I also noticed in One Piece, in the anime One Piece, you got Luffy D. And Luffy D has a bunch of relatives, or ancestors, or people with similar powers and abilities that also have the initial D in their name. And D, in essence, represents a half of a circle, and a half of a circle, for one, that's saying like, all right, it's a divide in a circle, like this circle is being divided. And you even see within that, what I'm saying, like, all right, say this is a D right here, divided, like within the word divided, there's a D. And no coincidence that, again, when you divide a circle, you even get the letter D. So just showing you, like, within the act of cutting a circle in half, where you got the full 360 or full 365, as some may say, but you got the full circle, and no coincidence that, when we talk in angles, a symbol for an angle is a circle, or should I say the symbol for degrees. And no coincidence that degrees start with a D. But the circle split in half or divided, you get the letter D. And then you have the demiurge, with Yaldabaoth in the Gnostic scriptures. But basically like these demigod type of beings. And then, duality. You got the yin and the yang, when I split that circle in half, you can almost, guess you would have to just add a little curvature. Well, no coincidence that you would have to add two smaller D's. Like this is a D right here, and then this is a D facing the opposite direction to make the yin and yang symbol in this circle. And that's almost like a whole, you see like the science of fractals, like how you got, again, like this D, and then it breaks into D within that, you know what I'm saying? And then you could do the same thing. Well, let me see. Can you do the same thing within? Yeah, you can. So and then you could do the same thing within, but you get the picture. It's like fractals, like same shape within the shape within the shape within the shape. So that also shows the connection right there. Excuse that noise in the background, the air conditioning here. It's getting excited listening to this. But you got, again, the D's, destiny, death, desire, despair, and delirium. You got Luffy D and all the D family members from, again, One Piece anime. If y'all familiar, most people at least faintly aware of One Piece. Then you saw how I just drew out the circle and then split it in half or divided the circle. And by dividing the circle, I come up with the letter D, which is the first letter in the word divided. And then also a crescent moon, because the sun, for the most part, the sun is a circle. Now, when the moon is full, it is a full circle. But then it also has a point where you can only see like a D-shaped part of the moon, or a crescent. Then you have the demiurge, and again, duality. And even in the word individuality, you have, it's in divi, like division, in divi, duality. And ultimately, as always, this is not, and this mostly is saying this for me, just as much as it would be for anybody else, always having to remind myself, like, when we point out certain things, it's not to say it's good or bad. The reason why I have to say that for me, because sometimes I feel like there is an energy of feeling a little like mad or like angered at the fact that I wasn't taught these things straight up, growing up. So when you finally get to express these truths, it's like, and you see this and that, as if you're trying to point it out as, you see, like this is bad, and it's not that you point it out as something bad, but more so it's like that kind of anger of like, almost like feeling like our intelligence was insulted, and to some extent still being insulted due to the fact that there are multiple beings that are fully aware of what I'm sharing right now, but it's probably a handful, of those beings sharing this, But which that'll get to the second point too, that I'ma share. So you have, again, the D's divided, all of this. Now within the series, they had a part where a character named John D. That's funny. So John D, last name D, but John D was actually a person, what I'm saying, dealing with the Ophanium and Enochian beings that he was, channeling, But John D in DC Comics, because you gotta realize Sandman is a part of the DC comic universe. And as always, shout out to, much love to Bridge of Ra, because he also pointed that out as we were talking about like the Teen Titans, the show Teen Titans. And matter of fact, in the show Teen Titans kind of get a little, on the more straightforward and grimy, underworldly type of energy, you know what I'm saying? And no coincidence, again, like that's that energy of DC Comics, as I really look back and look at it as a whole, and what's funny is like two of my favorite characters growing up was from DC Comics, like I was a big fan, like I can't forget, like, and I may have never mentioned this in a video before, but like I was a fan of Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing basically comes from, DC Comics, or the DC universe, and Batman, of course. Everybody mostly familiar with Batman, but Batman and Swamp Thing, and Batman, as we all know, Gotham City, and it had a lot of grimy type of underworldish type of energy, almost every time, because due to Batman's character, in essence, Batman only fought crime at night, you feel me? when the moon is out, you know, when this little D is in the sky, you know what I'm saying? Or possibly when the moon is full, but you know, you get the picture. And no coincidence that DC Comics, you know what I'm saying? You know, got the D in it. Now one could say, "Oh, that's just a coincidence," but you know, for most of us, we know that that's some bullshit. But as I say, that's some bullshit. You still gotta research or like, you know, have deeper understandings with it, you know, and not just believe somebody's word that's saying it's bullshit. You feel me? But John D. So back to John D's character. John D. Basically, he got a hold to this crystal. Matter of fact, he got a hold to a ruby crystal, you know. And this ruby crystal allowed for his dreams to, or, you know, his intentions to manifest instantly. Let's just say it like that. So he thought it would be a great idea to, you know, manifest a world where everybody told the truth. Like nobody lied, everybody told the truth, you know. And even right now, as I say that, you know, it sounds like, oh man, you know, that'd be a great world, you know. And it's like to some extent, because you do see like why everything is so much about balance, because it's like, all right, too much truth, you know, would be a little too intense, and too much lying would be too much deception, you know what I'm saying? As the letter D shows up in deception. But, you know, it's a balance. And within, you know, within the episode, or within, you say, the comic or the episode, the Sandman, or Morpheus, he caught up with John D. And he was basically saying, like, people can't have dreams if they can only experience the truth, you know. And that just goes into the deeper perspective, going back to, you know, also showing in essence why would these different, you know, beings have D as their, to really highlight it again, why would they have D in their names and how they represent duality? Because like he's saying, if it was one-sided, where it was only truth, you know, then that takes a lot of, like, you see, like a lot of quote-unquote spirits and deities, you know, represent a certain energy or a certain aspect of duality that technically they would cease to exist if, so like, say for instance, like Mars wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for duality. Like, how could war and penetrating something, like, what if it's all interconnected and it's all one, there would be no wars and there would be no need to penetrate something, you know, because Mars also deals with, like, you know, like penetrating. That could be in a toxic way, like you fighting and you kind of like looking to harm somebody by penetrating their skin with an object or something like that, you know. Or on a quote-unquote healthier perspective of it, like, you know, Mars would point to people who may want to be surgeons or morticians, you know, who like to dissect stuff. And then on a mental level, is people who like to dissect, you know, that like to analyze things. But if you, even with that, like if you in that space of knowing everything and, you know, like you're just the all that is all at once, well, there's no need to dissect anything, you know. Like you know it all, you got it all figured out, so it ain't no dissecting information, or, you know, it ain't no being analytical, you know. It ain't nothing to analyze. It ain't nothing to dissect. As the word dissect come up with the D. It ain't nothing to dissect. It ain't nothing to analyze. You know, it ain't nothing to quote unquote cut open. You know, it ain't no wars or no beef or no battles or no competition. You know, ain't no champions. You know, and it's funny because the champion symbol, if I'm not mistaken, you know, although it's a C like this, it kind of got like a little backwards D thing going on too. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? You see the little D in the word champion, and champion has to deal with, you know, again, like battling or warring, hence why it's, you know, one of the main things for, you know, sports, you know, because sports is, you know, it's a battle, so to speak. You know, it's one side against the other. It's the, you know, the Lakers versus the Celtics. You know, the night versus day. Yin versus yang. You know. So, again, when John D tried to make the world, not the real John D, again, John D from the comic books and from the Sandman show, you know, but, you know, he created a world where it was just filled with truth, and the dream, aka Morpheus, was like, man, people wouldn't be able to have dreams if they can only experience the truth. You know, and in so many words, it's like, you know, like a person wouldn't be able to fantasize, you know, if everything was all good, their life would be a fantasy, and therefore they wouldn't even care about trying to dream or leave, you know, quote unquote reality in that sense. Or should I say, you know, actuality. But this is just within the show, because in all actuality, you know what I'm saying, you know, the dream realm and being, you know, active on an astral level is what, you know, let's just say that experience is the origins of this experience on a physical level. You know, what we experiencing on a physicality, again, this realm on a physical level vibrates very slow. The reason why we have premonitions, maybe through dreams or like through clairvoyant or quote unquote psychic phenomena, is because it's vibrating on a frequency that's faster than this realm moves. So that's why you could quote unquote see it before it happens, you know. Or you dreamed about something, or you created something within a dream and then it happens later, you know what I'm saying? And showing you that, all right, this realm, you know, this is a byproduct of what has already happened and transpired on the astral level, you know. So again, you get the demiurge, you got the D, and then you also got the D, to get a little vulgar, you know, a phallus, which your P is like a D with an extended stem on it. You know, turn that stem and got like what looks like a phallus or a D. And no coincidence that, you know, having a sexual experience within this realm is only able to happen through, you know, the yin and yang being divided, or masculine, feminine. I hope I messed that up. Let me not write too reckless. Feminine but the masculine and feminine, being divided, having like a different experience. But again, like the only way the sexual experience exists on that level is due to this separation, this divide between masculine and feminine, which allows for mommy and daddy to even exist. And so now, the clitoris becomes a penis, because in essence, all babies, all of our physical bodies start off feminine before it changes into male. That's if it changes to male, because the women is basically staying in that state, you know what I'm saying? And men is like, all right, if it shifts, hence why men have nipples, but don't breastfeed, because what purpose does nipples serve on a male's body, Like if it has no functional living purposes, like, oh, well, your nipples exist because they, do something, do something that's vital for the body. And it's like, no, like a man's nipples does not do anything vital for, our existence, our survival, or, our health, because it's there because, again, the body was once more feminine and pointing to the androgynous origins, you feel me? But simply, you see how the D, the duality, and I also wrote down divine. And as I always reference that video I did live now, number 31. Go research that video if you want to look at more etymology on the word divine, and also kind of get into, again, this aspect of duality. But, you see, like, again, without duality, destiny, death. Because without duality, there's no need for death. It's like how, if life and death doesn't separate itself, in essence, then there's no reason for life or death in that sense of it. You know what I'm saying? Like how there's a destiny or a destination, if you still at the same, oneness point, which a dot also can represent like oneness or the universe, on certain levels. It's like, because again, and even looking at that, there's no destination. Look at this dot. And the video I did on what it is. I also talked about it on an older video about space travel, but the recent note session video, I want to say it's note session number 10, 9, or 8. But I was speaking on Saturn and certain aspects, of Saturn being the center of attention. But here it is that you got, like, again, so you see how Ma'at or math even get into it too. You got this one point, bam. And again, this one point, it could expand infinitely out in all directions, And when you take which is the, in so many ways, that's the glyph for Mars. You know what I'm saying? Now, when this dot decides to move, even with moving within itself, is going to a destination, you know. Even if it's not aware, like just say it goes this way infinitely, you know, it still in some way has like a destination, you know. And again, with these other ones, you know, how could you despair if everything was, you know what I'm saying, always happy, you know, like having desires? Like if you have everything, why would you even desire if you know, if you're, again, this is a dot right here, you got everything all right here. Like, why even desire, you know? And again, by eliminating, you know, the duality of things, again, like the example about within that episode where John D was trying to create a world where everything and everybody was like truthful, you know, then that would cause certain worlds to collapse, that would cause certain, you know, quote unquote, deities to, you know, in essence, transition or not exist in that sense of it. You know, because again, anything with a name has a born date, so it has an expiration date. You know, like the infinite, you know, always have been, always will be. And technically, you know, it's like the unnameable, you know what I'm saying? The unfathomable, you know? But when you got something that you know, that's born, like if something could be born, the fact that, you know, duality was born in certain ways, you know, duality didn't always exist. So the fact that duality was born, you know, it could also have an expiration date. But ultimately, now as I say that, that's not saying that, oh, you know what I'm saying, the world about to end in that sense, you know. Because it goes deeper. And just to not leave that hanging, you know, like, so, all right, you got, if it has a born date, it has an expiration date. But let's just say that, you know, some things could exist for such a long time that it could seem like forever. So hence it don't even pay to even, you know, think or even worry about like, oh, well, you know, this world going quote unquote transition or die. But even with that, it's like transitioning is not the end, you know. Transitioning is more of a transformation, you know, and not something ceasing to exist. It ceased to exist the way it used to exist, you know. Like when your body suit transition, you know, when you transition from out of your body suit, you know, out of your body, you know, you're no longer, you know, existing within your body in that sense of it, but, you know, your soul and your spirit, you know, lives on, but more so your soul, because your soul is more so the infinite aspect. Again, you see the D's, demiurge, duality, divine, you know, dick, phallus, you know, creating. And again, it's not to say like the phallus is the only thing, you know, again, it's the yoni, vagina, aka, and matter of fact, oh, look at that, let's do this the right way. Excuse the circles, but you know, the Vesica Pisces, you know, Pisces. The Virgin Mary, KarlHaynes, you know, portal. But again, what's also required is that phallus, you know. Right here, we'll just we'll do this. Vagina, Venus, but you see all the little connections with D. And again, you know, like destiny, death, despair, desire, delirium. And just to not trip over, like trying to sit around and figure out, you know, because when delirium, I was like, you know, I didn't know how to right off the bat, like have an explanation of delirium, but you get the picture. I'm pretty sure you'll sit and kind of get an awareness about it. You know, but delirium is like being delirious, which to some extent, on an archetypical level, they would be connected from the perspective of the dream aspect. So dream and delirium kind of connected archetypically. I wanted to say from the perspective of like the Pisces energy, you know what I'm saying? Like down here. You know, that's what Pisces as a zodiac sign archetype, you know, represents the dream. It could also represent the delusional. But delirium is also kind of somewhat more so of like, almost like a sensation, like a pleasure, like, oh, you know, I'm trying to explain it because the definition doesn't come to mind just right off, but you get the picture. And to, you know, end it or conclude it, you know, again, the demiurge is not a bad thing. You know, D is not a bad thing. Half of the full circle is not bad. It only becomes something quote unquote bad or harmful is when people so, you know, again, so speaking of like with the truth and lies, when people have been lied to too much, in the sense of where people think that just this half of the circle is the only thing that exists, and that this and only this half of the circle is the God and the only aspect to existence. That's when things get out of balance, you know what I'm saying? It's almost like thinking that like you got the Libra scale and it's like only one side of the scale exists. It's like, you know, it's like, nah, you know what I'm saying? Like the demiurge ain't the only thing. And once the demiurge kind of got a hold to, like, you could say, like, the spirits and the entity of the demiurge, you know, promoting certain religions in a manner that, for the most part, worships duality, you know, things could kind of get a little out of hand because, you know, there's a full circle, you know what I'm saying? It's like a bigger truth that's, you know, compared to only knowing, you know, one side of that truth. You feel me? Now, if this the whole story, then how could just this side be the only story? This is the only story and the only God, and you know what I'm saying? It's like, nah, you know, it's a full story. It ain't just about the D, it's also about the O. The circle, you know. Oh, it ain't just about D, you know. Because I think about vowels too, you know, because vowels connect words in essence. Like, you know, there's a bigger connection. Let me erase this. This is a part of the explanation. But, you know, vowels, I mean, in the English language, how they say that sometimes. Why? But, you know, like A, E, I, O, U, like, it doesn't have like a hard, because when you say consonants, and even the word consonants, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a sharp, like a cutting type of pronunciation, like duh. Like that kind of like stops at k, like that cut, like cutting duh. You know, what's some other ones? T. You know, and T is like a cross, you know, t. That's like cutting, that's kind of, you know what I'm saying? K. You know, it's like a rough, you know what I'm saying? Cut. Also, you know, which to some extent is also like a semicircle. It's not the, like, oh, I get it now. Oh. It's not just D. It's not, you know, to be a little vulgar, it's not just D. You know, it's also O. I did give a disclaimer that this is not for children at the beginning, but you know. Wait, again, you see. And this is an example of, like, you know, decoding, quote unquote, decoding the matrix and decoding the algorithms, you know. At first was the word, and the word is God, you know, so really understanding letters and sacred geometry, because sacred geometry is connected to letters, you know. Oh, dang, let's see. I'm gonna have to do it in another video. I'm gonna do it in another video, so I'm gonna just remind myself to add it to this, because the sacred geometry book that I recently was put on to, shout out to Seven Bomar, it's like a $300 book basically, and I came across it in the library in Arizona. you know. So shout out to college library, shout out to, you know, Tucson, Arizona, and the Wildcats, you know what I'm saying? Library, you know, for having that book. But again, you see the language within the how we decode things, again, gematria. Like, cause notice, like, I remember, like, back in the game, like, and I'm a research that right now, not on this video, but like, it's like, bruh, like, probably like all like I remember when YouTube was kind of like getting into the wild west days, you know what I'm saying, as far as sharing information and knowledge on YouTube. Man, the gematria channels, like the people who would like break down, like, basically, again, knowing what gematria is, like breaking down the words and the numerology connection. Because again, other than etymology, breaking down the roots, the Semitics are the roots of where the words come from, and then you could see like how it ties to different things. Also seeing like certain words and how a word in this language, in another language, all could come down to the same value, or different phrases or different quotes, could come down to the same numerical value, which will point to some type of connection. But yeah, I was gonna say, like, man, there's no gematria channels like how they used to be, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, dang, you know what I'm saying? That points out like how real gematria really is at decoding the matrix, And shout out to the sister who created the matrix. I forget her name. Who created the Matrix and the Terminator. But yeah, this is basically like reading the codes. And with certain levels of codes, with the majority of people, that's why I gave that, that quote unquote disclaimer and brought to the awareness at the beginning of the video. Like, the majority of people, like, if you're not researching, reading, if you're not researching this type of stuff, studying this type of stuff, if you haven't had the certain spiritual experiences that connect with the literature and, all of that, then, again, most of the people in the realm, you know what I'm saying? Let's just say, I ain't even gonna get into the whole NPC thing, but, the majority within this realm and the social engineering and subconscious programming that has been promoted within this realm would, make it seem like, again, this stuff would be basically like just making stuff up if you're not presenting book proof right along with it, And hence why, because we are in this realm, and some of us know that some beings may just be under, like, where they have that, that life, that soul in them, but they may be under a deep spell or in a deep sleep, Like, that's why we do, share certain, books. Although we know we could just explain these things just right out, and that the people who could get it, is also like, in essence, like reaching that hand down to somebody in the quicksand without stepping in, going back into the quicksand, because then we'd be stuck right there with the person we're trying to help. But it's like, reaching down to help pull them out of that quicksand, and, just sharing like, hey, here's this book, here's that book, here's this book, you know what I'm saying? To make it make sense. But we're gonna stop it at that, because I wasn't expecting for this video to be even this long. I wanted to just make a little simple connection aspect, but as the ball was rolling, it just kind of kept rolling a little bit, so you get it. but I will add on to this, showing like how certain alphabets is connected with sacred geometry, because that's what I was saying too. Like you see gematria, the alphabet, or etymology, and understanding the alphabets, and then how the alphabets themselves come from sacred geometry, and understanding sacred geometry, also getting into cymatics and how sound creates certain shape, or how vibrations create certain shapes, as Dr. Emoto showed with the water crystallizing. You could go look that up, Dr. Emoto, EMOTO to the newcomers, But yeah, just a little simple, you know what I'm saying? So you kind of get the design of, what's going on and why, also why some of us are diplomatic at, like when you get to like grow and mature in the knowledge, you do realize like in some way, even if you don't fully, like say if you're a little butthurt by duality, like, duality done harm you in certain ways that kind of just make you dislike it, or you felt like you was harmed by a certain archetype, or, a certain deity, like where, you may have like to some extent, let's just say a vendetta against, duality. But when you do mature, you still, like, you on a deeper level, you get like, but I could tell and I know that, certain things, although they may seem harmful, like war and, all these different things, like war, Mars, Saturn, all the different planets or archetypes or archons, all the forms of division within individuality or individuality, like all of this, because even within yourself, like me doing this video, like I wouldn't be able to do this video and share if I wasn't having an individual experience. And although this individual experience, I'm choosing to show how the individual is all interconnected, I'm still like, in some way, form, or fashion, and I'm valuing, my connection to individuality. I'm valuing my connection to the quote-unquote demiurge, but again, it's like not getting lost in it. You're not leading with duality, so to speak, As I was saying, like that's when it becomes harmful, It's not saying that it's something bad, but it becomes harmful if one thinks that duality is the only thing that exists in the world and in the universe. Like basically, again, thinking that half of the circle or only the D, that only the D exists. Yeah, Neil, I forgot how to say his name, Neil Gaiman or whatever, who wrote Sandman and other little thing. He definitely he had some experiences, or he was on some John D shit, summoning some shit. I don't say some shit, but he was summoning some beings or whatever the case may be, because he got a lot of insight and insider, type of, information within his comics and eventually shows, that he wrote, but, but that is just the connection with D, to give that full, not say full like this video has everything you need to know about the letter D, you know what I'm saying, but it has enough in connection with what I've already expressed on my YouTube channel, and of course what's also out there on other platforms that with trustworthy beings that's sharing the truth as well. But you see all the different little connections. So as I was referencing, this book, The Secret of Ancient Geometry, I forgot the brother's first name, something Brunez. And I was talking about, again, like decoding the matrix and how getting into gematria, getting into, understanding etymology, getting into understanding, like, letters or quote unquote alphabets and different letters and their origins and what they're connected to, and again, with, you see how certain half-truths or how some stuff could be taken literal. Some stuff is more like, figurative when it comes to, like, say for instance, certain stories and things in the Bible or certain ancient texts. It may not be completely exactly face value told in that manner, but then some stuff may be, like straight up how it's said, But one of the things I, again with the Bible is like at first was the Word, and the Word is God. And not even so much like the fact of like at first was the Word. Because again, at first was the Word in this realm, you know what I'm saying? But existence been existing, or us being, or being beings, you know what I'm saying, like, has been existing before words existed, you know what I'm saying? When it was like, basically, whether it's like telepathic and more so telepathic through images or through, feelings and vibration, like communicating through vibration. Hence why music is so much of a big thing, in essence, it's because it's the music itself, like it's the notes within the instruments. Hence why most classic music, old school music, which in most cases was done by like people playing actual instruments, whether it be, like a James Brown and some of these people, you know what I'm saying, that actually had people like actually playing the drums, actually playing the trumpet, and, like actually, having those vibrations. And now I'm tying this into this because, again, like showing like the Word, and the Word in the way it can create worlds, worlds, whirlpool, because as you say something enough, it create like a world. Let me see if I can write on this. Oh no, I can't write on this part. But, as you say world, a bunch of words that turn into a world, WORLDS, and then a world, WHIRL, like a whirlpool, basically cause an implosion to create a torus field and a little world inside that torus field. And seeing like how sacred geometry, again, is also related to like structure, as they're showing like how it's, creating the structure of these buildings, allowing for these buildings to have a certain level of structure. Now, I'm not getting into all the science, but I will kind of scroll through this slowly so that, you could pause the video and take pictures. But I will post this on Discord, on the Discord server as well, so I don't necessarily need to do this too much, so I'm gonna just kind of scroll a little faster. But right here though, they're showing the importance of 7, and again with a lot of stuff is like, again what they point out on here, the importance of a number, you know what I'm saying, that's gematria. And if I didn't say, first and foremost, because when I said gematria, I feel like I skipped saying numerology, you know what I'm saying, the like understanding the vibration and what numbers are typically represent, or what numbers just represent, and how they turn into certain types of archetypes, you know. But all right, so yeah, they're just showing different little stories that connect with the number 7. But what I want to get to is how they were showing the connection with letters in certain languages. Because then you even see, like, all right, it's not far-fetched when one would say that, you know, again, these letters, these words could create a world. Because look at, you know, like, the science of sacred geometry is about what? It's about building something. And you even think about crystals, you know, like crystals have a certain crystal structure, which is related to a certain geometrical shape. You know what I'm saying? That's related to a cube or related to a rhombus, or again, well, you got trigonal crystal structure, and you know, and hexagonal crystal structures. You know what I'm saying? But you see how this relates to creating structure on a physical level. So all right, they showing some here, but let's see. All right, there you go. Well, you know, they got this framework of geometry, you know, and how you could find certain letters within the geometry from different, you know, let's see. I know they mostly showing Greek and runic, you know, and hence again showing like the ancient aspect of, you know, as we want to say, Kemet, or just certain aspects of things being expressed, like with hieroglyphs, where it's like certain like pictures, you know, like basically like ancient emojis, you know what I'm saying? But why I'm bringing that up though, you see like how, again, like I was saying, like where it was the picture or the vision or the image, you know, and then also the vibration, but the image, the imagination, you know, before even words existed, you know. But then words still having a significance, you know, when it comes to how things, you know, operate within this realm. And hence why, you know, with hip hop or poetry, you know, where it's about the words, the lyrics, so to speak. So you see these letters are based on a certain, you know, geometrical structure that's aligned with certain, you know, measurements, you know, that's connected to, you know, building actual structures as well, you know what I'm saying? And of course you would have to check out, you know what I'm saying, all these slides to get the specifics. But again, you see in the red lines within it, it's showing, so let's see. I think I can't write on this screen, but you know, like with this shape, bam, you see the red line is highlighting, you know, the red lines within this is highlighting what you're seeing on side of it. So even showing even more like how important, you know, the words is. And like again, you just gotta see you could say the balance in it all, and how tricky things could get, in the sense of like, I'm pretty sure y'all seen and come across, and I done said this in so many ways, but I explain it fully. But basically how, we may explain like, all right, it ain't just about affirmations and words. It ain't just about what you say. But that doesn't mean to be like, well, fuck it, I ain't gonna worry about what I'm saying. It's not to say that, what I'm saying? It's not to say give up on affirmations. That's not to say give up on, speaking with a awareness of your intentions. You know what I'm saying? It's not to say just completely give up on it. It's just like, just to know though, it's like, all right, but this is not the only way things is being created within this realm. Because again, as I spoke to with the imagination, the visualization, and then that goes into the dreams again, as I was referencing the Sandman comic and the show, where the main characters, Morpheus, are dream, or he's the being or the deity over the dreaming world, but it's like, the astral body in the dream, like, like you getting into a space where you become more lucid within your dreams, also has to deal with a lot of what you're, quote unquote, manifesting within this realm. Your vibration is the first word, you know what I'm saying, before the secondary words and alphabets was created. Your vibration exists, and your vibration is in essence like a sound. So we've been speaking again, that shows like, again, vibration precedes alphabets and words. So we've been speaking before, just off of that. So you could even see right there, like, bam, vibration been existing before words existed. So you could also see, like, on a level, so it don't sound like, oh, you just saying that just to say it like it sounds good, but like kind of show the proof of that. Well, the proof is the fact that, again, like, before a baby is saying any type of word to a person, a baby is vibrating at a certain frequency, and that vibration is felt and heard on a telepathic level, in some sense. I say telepathic, but like on just a psychic communication level, like with the mother, most first and foremost, because in essence, the babies, she been the closest one to the baby, more than the father, just by default of the baby, or us being created within our mother's womb, so they like been wordlessly communicating through vibration. And even the fact that like a baby kicks while, if any of y'all had like either, your parents having a child, or, uncle, auntie, or older sibling or something, but basically where you got to touch somebody like a pregnant woman's stomach and you felt the baby kick, or you have children of your own, what I'm saying, whatever the case may be, it's like that vibration. And as above, so below, as within, so without. The process of pregnancy is telling the story of the universe, at least the story of the physical universe and how it was created at the least, it may not explain how the no thing, how something exists forever without a beginning or end. It may not explain that story, for the most part, but it can explain the creation and the existence of physical things in this realm. So again, the law of correspondence, mythology, or mythology/cosmology is anatomy by law, by law of correspondence. So again, you see how vibrations came before words, it was a vibration. And you could even say that vibrations, in essence, came before even numbers. It's the vibration, the movement, you know what I'm saying? That first move, and hence why, again, a lot of the connections with, source being connected, quote unquote God, but let's say source or the universe, like being connected to, melanated people, because melanated people happen to have like quote unquote rhythm. You think of James Brown, Michael Jackson, like phenomenal dancers, phenomenal athletes, being able to pick up on that vibration and embody those vibrations within, the expression of dance or sports or playing an instrument, you know what I'm saying? Like, you see the full circle of that. But that's it to add to, again. And I'm just, cause I'm just adding this because it came up, but I wasn't prepared to explain this book, because I ain't gonna lie. What's funny is, like, when I first, I'm like, oh yeah, new little book, and then when I saw some of these pages, I'm like, oh shit, this is like one of them, like, you gotta sit down and have a, you gotta really read this, like, especially with a lot of the mathematics that's in it. It's like, ain't no just necessarily, I mean, you could kind of skim through it and get an idea of certain things, but on certain levels, it's like, oh, you gotta really, you know what I'm saying? Your mind gotta be in that mode. But again, as I, just flip through it to get back to the beginning, let's see. And there's also some phi ratio measurements in here. So yeah, seekers of ancient geometry and its use. But now is the vibrate. Peace.